Hi everybody, and welcome to our second video regarding the citizen science kelp recording scheme for the Sussex Kelp Restoration Project. My name's Sarah Ward. I'm the Living Seas Officer at Sussex Wildlife Trust, and I'm joined by Ruth Eastwood, who has been contracted by the Sussex Wildlife Trust to help us set up a scheme, and she's done an absolutely fabulous job. We've got a scheme in place now, which we're going to share with you. So what essentially we're going to do tonight or today, whenever you're watching this, is basically show you how to set up an account on our new recording scheme and how to input your recordings. So like I said, this recording scheme is part of the Sussex Kelp Restoration Project, which is a partnership between lots of different organisations. I'm not going to list us all off. And yeah, we're really excited to be able to bring this recording scheme into the project. Oh gosh, this is happening very slowly. Okay, so the aims of the recording scheme are to enable us to capture biological records of kelp in a much wider geographical space than we're already working in. So as you may be aware, we're working with a number of different research organisations, lots of the local universities, who are undertaking their own different types of research regarding the kelp. And of course, that is feeding into this sort of geographical understanding of where the kelp is and where it isn't. And of course, not only are we interested in where the kelp actually is, if it's expanding, just where it's present, but we're also really interested in understanding where there isn't kelp, whether that be because the substrate's not suitable or because it's just not growing there for whatever reason, and that obviously helps us to much more clearly map out the extent of kelp, and that in turn will allow us to actually map a changeable map that shows the return of kelp along the Sussex coast as we get into our restoration project. So just to give you a little bit of understanding about the data flow, where all of our different types of data are coming from and where they're going, Ruth put together this really lovely flow chart so that we can get an understanding of that. So right at the top here, we've got our sources of data. So of course, in regards to the actual recording scheme we're talking about here, this is all of you guys. And then we've got academics as well, who are going to be feeding in. The data will be coming in from a slightly different direction, but it will all be amalgamated at the end. So the data supply, like I said, you citizen scientists yourselves watching this here will be recording via the scheme that we're going to talk about in more detail later on in this video. The academics will be using an Excel template, which will allow them to input much bigger sources of data rather than just doing single species records. And then we've also got sea search divers who are trained scuba divers who are using specific forms, and we act as coordinators of that project. So we'll be pulling that data over so that all of our kelp data for Sussex is all sitting in one place. So the data collection, as I mentioned, I'll be drawing that data from Sea Search over, and Sussex Wildlife Trust will be responsible for sort of pulling all of that together into that one place. We'll transform it as necessary, amend it as necessary, and verify it as necessary. We will have images in there as well, which will allow us to verify those records, make sure that what it's been put in as is definitely correct. And then once that's all been collected and put together in that one database, it will go to the Sussex Biodiversity Record Centre, which just so happens to sit at Sussex Wildlife Trust. So that's really, really useful. We're also going to archive it in Dash, which is a public repository, which allows us to store our data in the long term. It's future-proofed, it's really, really safe in there. So it's a really great place for it to be stored in the long term. And then obviously we're actually going to be wanting to use our data to understand the kelp in Sussex. So we'll periodically be publishing the outputs of that data collected so that we can show mapping and show the detail of the distribution. And of course, that will be shared with our university partners as well to provide information for their research, whatever that may be. So just to really go back to basics a little bit, for those of you that maybe haven't been doing biological recording before, biological records are really important, but it's also really important that we have all of the sort of underlying information that ties it all together. So of course, the record of what you've actually seen itself is the fundamental part of it. But of course, we need other information alongside that to form the entire biological record. So of course, the position where it was is fundamental, the time, so that we can timestamp that and know that it was there at this particular point in time. Your name as the recorder is an intrinsic part of the biological record, and we'll talk a little bit more about the GDPR aspects of all of this as we get into the scheme. It's an indefinite scientific record, and also this scheme itself is recording absence data, which does set it aside from some other types of biological recording that perhaps you might be familiar with. So hopefully that gives you just a little bit of information about what makes the biological record and how that is within our project. Of course, when we're talking about identification of species, you know, there is a level of expectation about, you know, making sure that you're recording what you think you're recording. And of course, we do have allowances in place for people who perhaps aren't 100% sure. But here's some recommended reading if you do want to, you know, get a little bit more into it. So this book here is a sea search guide. It's been primarily written for scuba divers with, you know, the seaweeds that are in there, but it does have a section on kelp. It's a really nice book, and if you are interested in seaweeds generally, it's a nice book. It's affordable, available online. And then if you're into using online sources of data and information, of course, the web can be a little bit of a difficult place to find reputable sources of information. There's quite a number of different places you could find good info, but I would specifically recommend this site, which is, I think I might have there we go, hopefully you can see that better. So marlin.ac.uk/species takes you just to a general species list of lots of different things you can find around the UK. And that is actually a website which has been put together by the Marine Biological Association in Plymouth. So a really reputable source of information there. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're actually going to do just a full walkthrough of how to get registered and how to input your data. So what I'm going to do is go into the actual website itself, and Ruth is going to walk me through it all. So this is the very first step, and what we're going to do, because obviously this is a recording, we will put all of these links in the description of the video, which you should be able to find fairly easily, and then you can click directly through to the links rather than having to write these complicated links down. So if I go into my other screen, which one is it? This one. Ruth, do you want to take it away?
Lovely, thank you, Sarah, and hello to everyone. We're really excited to start getting your kelp records, and the first thing you need to do to show your interest is to register with us. So when you follow that link that's available, you will come to the registration form for the Sussex Kelp recording scheme, which Sarah's going to show you here. This gives you a little bit of more information about what's going to happen to your data and about the system that we're using, so you can read that in your own time. And then we just have a few simple questions for you. Your name, your title, first name, last name. And crucially, what we require is an email address that is registered as a Google account. So this doesn't have to be the same thing as a Google email, but it has to be registered. And we'll also put the link that helps give you a little bit more information about how to do that. This is because the platform we're working to collect the data, Epicollect, requires a Google account for its security purposes. And if you would like to share with us your organisation and what capacity you're interested in kelp, and we've put some suggestions here, that would be amazing, because that helps us to build up a picture of the communities that really want to get involved with the kelp recording. And on the general data protection regulation front. So we've put in a question here at the end to ask if you accept the terms that we're giving and what we're doing with that information. So in order to move forward, please select yes, or if you'd like a little bit more information, then to select that button. So when you click the submit button on this form, your information is going to come to the Living Seas team. And what they're going to do is then be able to email you out the user guide for our kelp recording scheme. I think Sarah's going to show you here. Oh, there we go. So we've put together a little short user guide which kind of shows you how to get started with this, talks a bit about Epicollect, the logging on, very much what we're going to show you today, but you've got it there as something to refer to as you go through. And also once we send you that email, the user guide, we'll also send you the URL for Epicollect, our Epicollect project yourself. But as you can see, this is all the areas we're covering today.
Cool. So I'm not going to fill out this particular form right now as part of this demonstration because I've already registered my email address. So we're going to just pretend that we've done that and that we're now at the stage where I've received the user guide and confirmation that the registration has all been completed. So the next step is going over to Epicollect. So Ruth, do you want to start walking me through this section?
So when you first follow the link provided, you'll see that it comes up with the Epicollect website. It says in big letters at the bottom, at the top, that this project is private and please log in. And that's why we've taken your email address so that we can log you onto our project and register you with it. So you'll need to click on the sign in with Google button up there, which Sarah has already done earlier. Here we go. And you'll be asked to put in your email, select your Google or Google account email that you're using for it and put in your password. When you log in, you'll see the home page. It tells you about Epicollect, but you can see right at the top, it says, hi, whoever your name, so Living Seas here, because we're logged in as the Living Seas. The thing now is to find the Sussex Kelp recording project. So if you click on My Projects, right at the top bar there, we go. Because we've registered with you, you should now see the Sussex Kelp recording scheme project here. And if we click on View at the bottom, thank you, Sarah. Here we go. You can find a little bit more about the project. You can see how many entries we've had so far, and hopefully this is going to be growing very rapidly over the next month or so when the last record was put in, and a little bit more about why we're doing this project and reiterating some of the things we're talking about today. So as ever, if you get stuck through any of this process, please email the Living Seas at sussexwt.org.uk. So we're going to go straight in and show you how to enter a record into this system. So firstly, we need to click onto the green button here that says View Data. One thing you might notice now is that it said we had about 20 records of data, and here we can just see one row of data. And this is because you're only going to be able to see the data that you put into the system at this stage. So any records you've got will show up here, and we've got one that we carried out earlier. But if we want to add a new record, we have to click on the Add button right up here, just in that purple bar. There we go. I need to move my picture a little bit. There we go. Now we're into the start of the recording form. So at the top here in the purple bar, you have a little percentage bar that shows you your progress through the form. I'm just going to And your progress through the form is going to vary depending on your answers. So the flow depends whether you've seen kelp or not seen kelp. For example, some of the questions may be not relevant to you, and so you won't see them. And as we go through the form, you'll notice that some of the questions have a little star on them. And these are the mandatory questions. So these are things that you really need to answer, or you will not be allowed to get away without answering as we go through. So as we say, we've got some links here to remind you about where you can get help finding out about different seaweeds. We go on to the next page, Sarah. Thank you. We've just got a reminder about how these records are going to be held and the fact that all of them will be stored and shared under what's called a CC BY Creative Commons license. And by submitting this data to us, we take that as acceptance of this particular license. But that means that your data is going to be able to be used by researchers and particularly by the Sussex Kelp restoration team, which is going to take their work forward in the future. Next page, please. Here we go. And this is reiterating that these records are going to be shared and archived for posterity with DASH, which is the Archive for Marine Species and Habitats Data. Okay, next page. Right, so now we're really starting to get your data. The first thing that we need to know is what's the date of your record. When did you see your kelp? So Sarah's going to select a date here. You can see that it becomes highlighted. Here we go. Now, as Sarah said, we're collecting absence data as well as presence data. So this is your first decision. Did you actually see kelp? Today, we're going to go for yes. So this gives us a chance to show you some of the other details you might like to tell us about. Thank you. The next question asks you whether kelp was stranded on the beach, because certainly when there's a lot of kelp or it's a bit rough, it sometimes does turn up on the beach. And this is going to be important information to help us know what's going on and how much kelp is out there as well. So we'd like people to look out for kelp on the beach, but today we're going to say no, because we'd like to find out a bit more about where it might be situated and where it's growing. Thank you. So the next decision is, which species of kelp did you see? So we've listed the common species of kelp here, but if you're not sure, don't worry, you can always choose I'm not sure. It's in the laminariales at the bottom here. There we go. So we've chosen our species just by clicking on the button. And then we're also asking you how confident you are of your identification. So again, if you think it is one of those species, do select the species you think it is, but you can tell us that you're not sure about that. Or if you're absolutely certain and you've seen it before, you know it really well, please tell us that, because that helps us to build up the data set. Thank you. And to help us with actually seeing how much kelp there is and to help with those identifications, we would like you to, if you have, to share video or photographs with us. And you can do this on the website by adding dragging a photograph into these cells here. Don't know if you've got a photograph handy, Sarah.
I haven't got anything saved on this computer actually, but I can show you how you would you click on here and it just pops that up. And had I not have just totally emptied my computer of everything within it so that I can save this recording, I would have something to drop into it. But that's fairly straightforward, isn't it? You just go to the file and click open and it will automatically pop into there.
So it takes photographs in quite a range of types. So you've got JPEGs or PNG. It can only take them up to a maximum of 10 megabytes. So in some cases, you might have to make your photograph a bit smaller. But we've got the facility here to add 5 different photographs or to add some video. I know if many of you are diving, you might be recording in video. And we'd absolutely love to see what you're finding. But these are optional, so you don't feel that you have to. If you don't have a video, we still want your record.
I think what's really important here as well is that if you've in the previous pages said, I think it's this, but you've selected I'm not certain, that would flag it up to us on when we receive it, that if you've added photos, that we can look at your photos and verify your record and you know, feel more sure about what it is that you've seen, and obviously we can let you know as well that you were right, or we've corrected it to this species. So that's why photographic evidence is really important there. Okay, next slide.
Now this again is would you like to add more details? So in some cases we're hoping that you've got a little bit more information about the location of that kelp, where it's growing. But again, don't worry if you haven't. If you don't, then just click no. But we're going to have a look at the questions here and what kind of detail you could add, because all this will help to build up a picture about where kelp's coming back in Sussex and where it's growing and what the habitats are like. So the first one is, what's the principal habitat and substrate at the site? And there's a drop-down list here of the types that you might have come across. And you can select here, which we go for today, rocky reef and bedrock.
I'll go for rocky reef, but what I'll just say is one of the bits of feedback I've already had from someone that was testing the system for us was perhaps a little bit more guidance about what these categories actually mean in reality. So that's something that we'll probably be putting together at some point, is just some really brief pictorial guidance on what these different particularly things like cobbles and pebbles and sand and gravel, you know, it can be a little bit like, oh, have I got one or the other? So we'll try and put some guidance on that together, just so that everybody can feel clear. But if you're not sure on the difference between cobbles and pebbles and sand and gravel, please don't get too like worried about the detail there. It's not, you know, completely fundamental to the data set, if that's, you know, if it's a little bit wrong. But we'll select rocky reef or bedrock for the purposes of the demonstration.
Okay. And then if you know what the seabed cover is like, we'd like to know a little bit more about that. And again, there's items that we might put more information into the user guide to help you distinguish between a kelp forest and a kelp park, or how the length of the animals on short or long, tall animals on the turf. So things like this, more help would be coming. And then if you know the maximum depth that you saw the kelp, that would be helpful for us to get an idea of how far down it's growing, and particularly abundance, because obviously kelp's had a bit of a hard time and we want it to be coming back, and we want to see how that growth is coming, and we're not imagining that everything's going to be super abundant to start with. So please select this to give us an idea of how common kelp is where you saw it. And then also we're interested to know how big an area the kelp covered. Is it an individual plant just in one location, or is it the you know, a large area where kelp is starting to restore? So if you could put your measures in approximate square meters here, obviously we're not expecting you to measure it. Again, it's just to give us a rough idea. And then what stage was the kelp at? What life stage? So was it an adult? Was it sort of a fully grown kelp? Or was it a juvenile? Is it just developing? And we're also interested to know what the holdfast was attached to. And again, you might recognise this list of possible substrates for it.
So it's very likely, you know, if you've put rocky reef for the above, that it probably was attached to rocky reef, but of course rocky reef may have been the broad habitat, but it may be rocky reef with a few boulders around, so it may be that the actual holdfast was attached to a boulder. So that's where why we have this as two separate questions, but you know, it's absolutely correct to put the same thing in twice, which is what I'm going to do here.
And then what's the visibility like in the water? Again, this is not going to be an exact science, but it's just to give us an idea here.
We had great visibility on this virtual dive. We had a full 8 meters, so that's be jealous of my virtual dive.
And how warm was it, Sarah?
Oh, it was a balmy 19 degrees.
And then there's a box here at the bottom for any other notes. So anything else you might have observed that you think is interesting, any other animals of particularly using the kelp, things like that. So please do feel that if there's anything else you've noted that we're not asking you about, we are interested in hearing that too.
I think one thing that we should probably note as well is all of these questions are optional. So if there's anything that you're not sure on, you can just leave it blank and it will still let you go through to the next page. So don't feel that you have to make something up just to fill in the box. If you're not sure or you really don't know, just you can leave it blank. It's better for us to have the information be left blank than it be made up or incorrect.
Now we're moving on to a crucial part of a biological record, which is the location. And this is a required question. So what is your general location? So you could tell us that it's Brighton or off 1 meter, a mile off the coast of Brighton. Try and be as specific as you can, but using landmarks to help us here. We will, in the next following questions, take coordinate from you as well, so we've got a nice accurate, or as accurate as we can, point for mapping purposes, but this is helpful for us to get ideas of general trends of where kelp is being seen. So the first question, as I said, is kind of a location and maybe how far you were from it. The second one, there we go. Today we've dived in Sussex. Excellent, where it was lovely and warm. So, and if you're at a particular dive site or wreck site or pipe outlet or something like that, we also really want to know that, because that's going to help us if we want to go and monitor kelp in those locations.
These sites also, that having some names or visual reference points also help us to cross-reference your GPS location as well. So sometimes, you know, if somebody has changed the format of their GPS, or this happens a lot with Sea Search, accidentally taken their GPS when they've got home, so sent it to me from the car park. It just helps us to sanity check and sometimes give us a laugh. But just make sure that, you know, we've got a sensible GPS attached to it by comparison to where you've sort of said you were geographically.
The next question might seem a little bit strange. Are you at your location right now? That this is because the platform we're using here has the web form that we're showing you, but it also has a phone app that we will talk about in a little while. And I know that for most of you, it's really unlikely you're going to be at your location now, but hopefully kelp's going to get so common that it's going to get washed up on the beach, and we might have people using our app that will be out on the beach and they will be at their location right now. So we're going to say no today, because we don't want the web or the phone to take our location, but that will be a facility available. Here we go. So we'd like to know how you took how you generated your coordinates. Again, this is just to give us an idea of the scale of accuracy in those coordinates. So most commonly, it might be using a chart, it might be using your GPS, or a mapping website that you've latterly gone back and had a look at. And then we're asking you, what type of coordinate data do you have? Is it a single locational central point for kelp, or have you got a starting and a finishing location, perhaps of a dive that you've been in? So you have the facility to choose these different ways of recording your location, because we know sometimes if you're diving under the sea, you're not going to have your GPS perhaps accurately with you, or recording accurately. So today we're just going to run through putting in a single location. Okay. And we're asking you to describe what that location means to you. Is it where your boat was? Is it the centre of where the centre of the kelp site, or is it just specifically where kelp was? Again, this is to help us build up our picture of how widespread the kelp is. Okay. Now, this is a critical bit, is deciding which coordinate format you've used. So the most common one probably for marine recording is longitude and latitude in degrees and minutes. So we've given a couple of examples here. Sarah, could you pop your mouse by that one? Because you can put this in different formats, depending whether you put the north, south and east, west at the end of the coordinate, or whether you use north as a positive. Therefore, in the next example, there's no letter associated with that, and we've used a minus for west instead of the letter at the end. So degrees, minutes will be acceptable by the system. You might also have a decimal longitude and latitude, which doesn't have any of the degrees. It's just written with 2 or 050, a dot, and then a whole string of numbers. This is actually our preferred option, the decimal, because we will be converting all of the grid references into decimal at the end of the day for our mapping purposes. If you have coordinates which are in degrees, minutes and seconds, we're asking that you convert this in advance of using the system, and we've got a website identified where you can do this, and we'll put that information for you to use. And we ask if you could convert it into decimal, that would be amazing. But today we're going to put in a record in degrees and minutes.
Just another point there, Ruth, just from having, again, already been dealing with records like this through Sea Search, one thing that's really important specifically here in Sussex is making sure that you get it correct with your east and wests. I'm sure many of you will know that the meridian line goes directly through Sussex. Along the coast, it's basically at about Peacehaven. So if you've got that wrong, it will automatically mirror your image to the opposite side of Sussex. So it's really important to make sure that you've got your east and wests or your little negative symbol there correct, just so that, because sometimes it can be quite difficult to tell if you're right on the meridian whether you've got your location right. So just something to bear in mind. Sussex is a bit of a special county with regards to that. Right, so next slide then.
Yeah. Now in this slide, we're ready to take your data, and you can paste in from another system, or you can type it in yourself. I do ask that you use the degrees symbol in order to make the rest of our system automate the conversion. And you can find that by either searching online or going into Word and inserting a character and copying and paste that over.
I'm going to just do a digital one. And sorry to my friends at Mulberry Marine Experiences, I don't know what the coordinates of the old lifeboat station is off the top of my head, but we're going to just go like that.
That's what
we're doing
we'd like
it the wrong way around. No.
is to use 6 decimal places. So in this case, we've got one location, so we've got 1 latitude and longitude. If you had selected a starting and ending location, you would have 4 boxes here: a starting latitude, an ending latitude, starting longitude, and an ending longitude to complete. Okay. And then finally, we'd just like to know what your name is. Again, that's so that can stay with the record in case anyone's got questions over that or wants to know more about it. and then any other information that you think might be useful for us. If you've got multiple species, we'd prefer it that you completed this form for each kelp species, but you can tell us about multiple species here in this box here, or again, anything that might be using that kelp. Great. Now, the important thing to do once you've done your record is click the Save Entry button. The web version doesn't let you save a partial entry, so once you've done it, you can always edit later, so don't worry about that. Great, so we've put our first record in. So if we go to exit up in the top corner, we can now see we have a new line of data. So the new records are put at the top, and this is our, it's a bit unwieldy to sort of scroll through all of these records, these fields, but you can do so to see the information you've added. You can also click on the little I at the beginning of that record. There we go, which will allow you to scroll through that data, which is a bit more user-friendly for reviewing your data. There we go. And if you want to edit the data, you can click here, and basically it takes you back into the same format of the form, and you can go in and through and make changes. And if you really decided you've been having sleepless nights over the fact you didn't see that species and it was something else, and you want to take that record out, you can delete it here as well. Once the records have been downloaded by the Living Seas team, that record will be in the system for perpetuity, and it won't be able to be, you can delete it from your view here, but it won't delete it from the main kelp recording scheme database. And yes, the team will be downloading from Epicollect on an infrequent, frequent basis as your records come in. Okay.
Cool. Is that pretty much is the walkthrough, isn't it?
That's our walkthrough of running the system. I'd like to just say that you can, as we said, use a phone app with the same questions instead of, so we're just going to have a quick, and it will work on either an Android or an iPhone. And what you can do is go to the Google Store or the App Store and look for Epicollect 5 data. Here we go. And you can install that on your phone. You will need to log in when you open up the program, the app, with the same email address that you gave us earlier. And then you can add a project. You click on the Add Project button there, and you start typing Sussex Kelp recording scheme. And then you'll be able to select our project. If it doesn't come up, that means perhaps you're using a different email address, and we need to double check that. And then, as you can see in the next screen, that the questions and the boxes are pretty similar to those that we've just run through on the web version. The app's got a little bit of different functionality. For example, you're unable to upload videos that you've taken in advance. It will only take live video, which is not as helpful for this purpose. So if you've got video that you've taken on your dive, you need to be using the web version. Yeah, super.
Cool. So just a little bit of information just to wrap things up. So obviously you've input your data into that, and that means you can kind of be like, right, finish. But I'm sure many of you will be interested to know what then happens with your data. So as Reece said, our team back here at Sussex Wildlife Trust will be reviewing all of that data and curating it. And just like I said at the beginning when we were talking about the data flow, and we will be doing ongoing mapping. But of course, what we're kind of yet to totally figure out is how regularly we're going to be downloading that information and creating maps. So it really does depend a little bit on yourselves as users of the system as to how much data we're getting and what sort of flow of data we're getting through that system. So we are anticipating when we first launch this, we're probably going to get a whole load of data come through, you know, perhaps where people have been sitting on it from the summer and where people have that initial interest. And of course, we're then going into winter. So probably the amount of records, particularly through scuba divers and free divers, is probably going to drop off a little bit. But what we'll work out, you know, in the grand scheme of things is how regularly we start downloading that and creating mapping. But of course, that will all be you know, something that we want to make a bit of a shout about. So hopefully you'll be in touch with us if you're on the Kelp newsletter, or if you're following us on our social media, that kind of thing. But then in terms of, you know, the actual data and where it gets sent, then like I mentioned earlier, it's all going to get archived in the system called Dash. It will be publicly available. It will probably be going through what's called the NBN gateway, which is where all of our sea search records go as well, which means that you can basically go on to the, sorry, it's called the NBN Atlas now. You can go onto that, just you can Google it and find those records by looking for specific species, and you'll be able to see little things pinpointed on maps. And like I said, it will be available to use by our research group for much wider research within the Sussex Kelp Restoration Project, which is really exciting. So just before we finish, I'm just going to stop sharing there, and we put together just a few FAQs. Of course, if you have got questions, please do feel free to get in touch directly. Of course, we ended up recording this as a pre-record rather than a live recording, so I'm sure there will be some questions that come up and we'll be very happy to answer them. But just a few questions that we've kind of had from people that have been in touch with us or testing the system for us. So one question was, why do you want to know if you haven't seen kelp? So I think we probably have already answered this throughout the course of what we've been talking about. But yeah, basically just in order for us to build up a really accurate map of where kelp is, it is just as important to know where it isn't, so that we can map out, this is where we've seen it, but know certainly that where we haven't seen it, that it definitely isn't there, rather than us taking an assumption that it isn't there because it hasn't been looked at. So that's kind of the thought process there. Do I need to upload images, was an FAQ. So having walked through, you'll probably have noticed, you know, that wasn't one of the questions that had a star on it. So it's not absolutely necessary. The system will quite happily accept your record without any imagery attached to it. But if you do have images, please do upload them, because it helps us to be confident in the data. It allows us to check the records. Like I said, if you've put down that you're unsure in your identification, we can then take a look at it and say, yes, that definitely is, or actually, we're not sure either. We'll take it up a level, back up to, it's a laminaria species, but we don't know which one. It's far better for us to have, you know, higher level recording than incorrect species. So having imagery or video just really helps us to have that confidence in the data. Do I need to complete all of the additional information fields? Like we've kind of been through this, like I said, when we've been going through the form filling, but yes, these are all optional, but the more information that you can provide us, the more helpful your record is. So maybe, you know, if you're doing this for the first time, maybe make a little note of all of the different fields that you can be recording, so that you can, when you're out there recording your kelp, you know what it is that we're after, and that way you've got a kind of a record of what you need to record. But like I said, if you don't have that information, or you forgot to record it at the time, that's fine. Either just leave it blank, or some of them will have options for you to say that you don't know. And then finally, what about recording species that aren't kelp? So Ruth mentioned, you know, if there's anything particularly interesting that you saw, you know, like something that was associated with the kelp, obviously there is option within that form itself to note those down. But if you want to do recording specifically to create a biological record for anything else that you saw, please do that in a different type of recording form. So this form has been specifically created just for kelps. But there are plenty of other recording schemes available whereby you can input your other records that you think are of interest. I tend to encourage volunteers that come out with me either on Sea Search or Shore Search if they're doing recording kind of anecdotally rather than through our schemes to use iRecord. And that way it's sort of in one place. That's a really good system. It's quite a similar kind of form whereby you can put photos in, you put your location, that kind of thing. And that all does actually get verified by a verifier on the back end who will look at your record before it gets submitted. And again, that all goes through to the NBN gateway. It's downloaded by the Biodiversity Record Centre. So it's very much a similar system and brilliant to use. But if you are very interested in recording marine, particularly if you're a diver or a snorkeler, free diver, please do consider that you might want to get involved in Sea Search, which I've talked about earlier. And we will do probably a separate webinar or pre-recorded video about Sea Search in preparation for next season, which will be starting around the springtime. But other than that, I think that pretty much wraps it all up. So thank you ever so much for watching. All of the links, like we say, will be in the description of the video. But if there is anything else that you would like to ask us more directly, you can email us. The email address, I think Ruth has been pointing it out through the video, is livingseas@sussexwt.org.uk, and we'll get back to you. But we're really looking forward to receiving your records, so please do start sending them in. Excellent. So thanks ever so much again for watching.